That's only if I do it right.
Do it in one.
Here you go. I think there's more than one. And you have to like the children's channel.
Of course.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Cacavalli, your Sunday Services Associate today, and I'd like to welcome you to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. where we covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We adhere to the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find on the newcomer card placed on the back of each chair and at the welcome table in the Great Hall. We are an inclusive, welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
This book records marriages, births, and printed advertisements related to enslaved people in Morris County from 1756 to 1841. It also contains inventories of property owned by the people listed. The property included human beings. Familiar names of the owners mentioned include Richard Campbell, Lewis Condict, and William Patterson. In 1821 in Pequannock, one inventory listed cows, 2 black men, grain on the ground, $482. Here's a list from Mendham that same year. Black boy and a lot of poultry, $15.87.
I have just a couple announcements to share with you today. The first is there are copies of this paper called Resources and Opportunities. It tells a little bit about the music that you're hearing today. It has a bibliography of readings and some other information about a call to action and online resources. So feel free to pick one up from the usher table as you leave the service. The Odyssey Project today will feature Barbara Stasiak today at 12:45 p.m. And the 2nd and 3rd grade RE class is collecting supplies for an animal shelter through next Sunday, March 12th. Please consider donating cat food and treats, bully sticks or long-lasting treats, cans of pumpkin or sweet potatoes. I didn't know that was a thing, but Kong toys. The donation box is in the Great Hall.
In 1806, Mahalone Ford wrote, "Please do register a Negro boy by the name of John, belonging to Morris Township and born of a wench named Rose, my property." In 1829, Stephen Vale of Morris Township recorded, "My black man Cato was married to Jacob Wilson's black woman Betty."
Chopping cotton, don't be slow. Better finish out your row. Keep moving with that plow. Drive a man will show you how. Get to work and root that stump. Drive a man will make you jump. Better make your hammer ring. Drive a man will start to swing. Ain't but 2 things on my mind. Drive a man and quitting time. Drive a man to kind of boss. Ride a man and lead a horse. When his cat a nine-tail fly, you'd be happy just to die. Run away and you'll be found by his big old red bone hound. Pat a roller, bring you back. Make you sorry you is black. Drive a man, he made a life, but the mammy ain't his wife. Ain't but two things on my mind: drive a man and quitting time.
In 1778, Jacob Green, the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in East Hanover, just down the street, advocated that the colonies should continue the rebellion against the British, even though things were not going well. But he insisted that slavery should be abolished at the same time. He wrote, "We shall have inward convulsions, contentions, oppressions, and even calamities, so that our liberty will be uncomfortable till we wash our hands from the guilt of Negro slavery." And now I will ask Toby Tyler to light the chalice as we read some special words together. Our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to journey toward wholeness. We seek to create beloved community. To do this, we must unaccountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. To dismantle something, we must start at the root. We begin at the beginning and start right here. And now please join in singing hymn number 1003 in the Teal Songbook or up on the screen.
You're all going to get to sing four-part harmony today. I think that's right. Somebody go over there. So you guys, through this row, are number one. You guys over here along the side are number two. All of you are number 4, and you guys along the side are number 3. And we're all going to learn it together. Each line will repeat once as we learn. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Okay, you guys are number 1, and you're just going to keep singing number 1. And we'll start there. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Keep going. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we are we going? Great.
Is this good? Good morning, everyone. Now I'd like to invite our young people to come and sit with me, if you like, so I can tell a story. Several stories, really. This part's called How to Be a Unitarian Universalist Anti-Racist. And you can sit and look at me or wherever you like. Now, when I was 5 or 6, is anybody here 5 or 6 years old? We lived in France because my daddy was in the army and he was helping in the hospital there. We played with other army families. One time there was a picnic and there were lots of other American army children there. My little sister was a baby and she was in her playpen. She had straight, wispy blonde hair. There was also a little boy who was about 5 or 6, like me and you, and he had a little baby sister too. He was African American. He came over to look at my sister in her playpen. He kept looking at her and he seemed worried. He looked over at his little sister and back to mine. And then he said to my mom, shaking his head, "You'd better curl that baby's hair." My mother laughed, and his mother laughed, and his mom explained that my sister's hair was just right for her, and his baby sister's hair was just right for her, exactly the way it was. There was so much love in the laughing of my mother and the laughing of their mother. And the little boy and I both learned about loving ourselves and loving our sister's hair exactly the way it was. Also, while I was in France, I was on my school bus with my French friends. A man walked by. He was a black man. Suddenly, the children on the bus stopped talking. One of them said, "Un nègre." That meant a black person. And all the children, all the white children, white like me, were quiet because they were afraid. Just because a man was walking by. That was not just not knowing people could be different, like the little boy looking at my sister. That, what happened on the bus, that was race prejudice. I have one last story. Oh, and the race prejudice wasn't because the man was black. It was because racist people had taught those white children to be racist and prejudiced. I have one last story. This one isn't about me, except it is, because it's about New Jersey, and I'm in New Jersey. Probably you know that hundreds of years ago in our country, there was a rule that people could buy other people and tell them what to do for the rest of their lives. At first, the rule was that anyone could be sold to another person in certain situations, but then they made the rule that only black people and Native Americans could be sold. These people were called slaves or enslaved people. Their owners made them work for no pay. They only got the food or the clothes or the houses that the owners decided they should have. The owners could beat them or even kill them. And there was also a rule that the enslaved people could not call the police or anyone for help because the owners had power. So this wasn't just race prejudice, like on the bus, but it was race prejudice and power, and that is racism. Prejudice plus power. Now, you might have heard that there were enslaved people in the south of this country, But there were slaves right here in New Jersey, in Morris County. And even after that, there were racist rules, like African Americans couldn't go to the same schools as white children, like they and their parents couldn't eat in the same restaurants as white people. And it was okay to pay them less than white people for the same work. Does that sound fair? Today, the laws say everyone should be paid the same and go to the same schools and have the same chances, but really, there is still race prejudice. And there are still people with power who have race prejudice or don't notice that they have it. So racism still keeps people from having the same chances. Is that fair?
No.
Because we are Unitarian Universalists, we want to be anti-racist. So we can't just be sad or mad about this is making you mad, right? Good. But we can't just be mad or sad. We have to look out for race prejudice and racism and make it stop and fix the things that are still unfair because of racism. Sometimes people we love, or teachers, or even our very own selves, can be racist. Sometimes we might have race prejudice and not realize it. Sometimes you just think our way is the only way to be. But the good news is people can change. We have to change, especially if we are some of the people who got used to having the rules work for them better than for other people. Because that is what love is. Can one of you, maybe can you pick up the children's chalice and carry it out? And please, can we sing the children to their classes with the song, There Is More Love Somewhere, number 95. I haven't received any milestone or passages cards today, but I'm sure that some of us here are holding celebrations or concerns in their hearts. So I'd like to take a moment of silence to hold ourselves in community and to think not only of our own celebrations or concerns, but also to hold in our hearts those in our community, here at MUUF, and in the larger world, who are working to ensure that Black lives matter. May we have a moment of silence. Amen, blessed be, and namaste. And now is the time for our offering, which will be split 50-50 with Black Lives Matter of Morristown. You can donate via text to give or online, and the information is in your order of service, either online or here on paper. And as we give generously, please enjoy our offertory, O Freedom.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom, brothers, oh, freedom, sisters, oh, freedom over me. Hallelujah. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, brother, no more weeping, sisters, no more weeping over me. Hallelujah. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. There'll be no more moaning, brothers, no more moaning, sisters, no more moaning over me. Hallelujah. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Hallelujah. There'll be singing, there'll be singing over me. Hallelujah. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my own grave to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, 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 oh, freedom, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, buried in my grave, and go home to my Lord and be
$1781, reward, $1,500. Negro man, Frank, and Negro woman, Phoebe, wife, 16-month-old male child, took 2 horses. 1818, reward, 6 cents. Dinah, about 20, seen in the vicinity of Morristown, pregnant. Reasonable charges paid.
Unitarian Universalists do not share a mandatory creed, but we have worked to agree on a set of principles to guide our ethical and spiritual journey together. 2 years ago, this fellowship overwhelmingly adopted the 8th principle. It states, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions."
To hold ourselves accountable in dismantling racism, the Black Lives of UU Collective has charged congregations to research the history of Black membership in their own institutions and of Black residents in their localities. In creating this service, I was inspired by the work of First Parish in Needham, Massachusetts. They did as BLUU asked. They checked their history. Needham was founded in 1711 as a small, poor farming community. Their current minister, Katie Scudera, said, "It had never occurred to me that slavery happened here." Not only did slavery happen in Needham, turns out the first minister of her church sold the labor of a man named Homer to the church. Homer was owned by the minister. Homer worked as a sexton. The church paid his wages over to the minister. Until his death in 1753, Homer never saw a penny. Reverend Scudera also found that there were Negro church members listed as being owned by some white member families, although they had to sit in a segregated section. Even worse, there were names of Black children listed as being owned by members, but no names of parents for these children. We know how that would have happened. I'm not sure where this drawing is supposed to be, but many auctions of human beings in New Jersey happened in Perth Amboy, where slave ships came to unload. One abolitionist recorded his horror at just such a scene as this in Perth Amboy, where the heartbroken mother's piteous cries on having her child torn away did not cease for the whole day. So, here we are in New Jersey, Morris County. What is the history of Black residents in our locality? Morris County was split off from Middlesex County in 1715, but the whole state was already growing, partly thanks to slavery. A law passed in 1664 provided that settlers could get up to 150 acres for each adult enslaved person they brought to the state. Shortly thereafter, in the 1670s, a man named Lewis Morris brought over 60 of them from his plantation in Barbados to do back-breaking work in an iron mine and nearby ironworks. This was in Tinton Falls, Monmouth County. The practices in Barbados included some of the toughest rules for enslaved people in North America. Morris and his nephew, also named Lewis Morris, made the rules for the enslaved Blacks and white indentured servants working on the land and the mine and the factory. The rules were that enslaved laborers did harder, unskilled labor, and white indentured servants did skilled labor. This helped set the stage for ongoing race discrimination in job categories even after slavery was abolished. The 66 slaves that Morris the Elder owned at his death in 1690 made up 60% of all of the slaves in what was then called East Jersey. Lewis Morris, the nephew, inherited the mine, the foundry, the plantation, and the enslaved people. He also became New Jersey's first colony-born governor. So, Morris County and Morristown, and indeed this fellowship, are named for Lewis Morris, the nephew. Here is the Morris family crest. If you read Latin, you'll know that their motto, tandem vincitur, means at last it is conquered. Believe it or not, both Lewises were Quakers. Quakers didn't become abolitionists until 1776. Before that, they profited from forcing work from Blacks and Native Americans, just like the other landowning people. And since it was illegal for Black people to own land in many parts of New Jersey until 1798, The landowners in need of slaves were overwhelmingly white people. As I told the children, the rules were different for white and black people. In those days, New Jersey was not a unified state, of course, so rules varied from place to place. But early on, there were separate courts for the races, and blacks did not have the right to trial by jury. But in 1712, after a violent slave revolt in nearby New York that included arson, New Jersey passed tougher laws, inspired by the rules in Barbados, brought into the state by people like Lewis Morris. For example, the penalty for arson for an enslaved person was changed to burning at the stake, a penalty that was not risked by white arsonists. And this was carried out. It wasn't that these people had no reason to know better. The best friend of the younger Morris was George Keith, who wrote the first abolitionist tract in the colonies in 1693. The two remained close, even as Keith refined his reasons for opposing enslavement. Louis the Younger never freed a single one of his slaves. Until his death in 1746, he profited from their skill and labor and the production of more slaves from the rapes that he continued to permit his white workers to commit on his black women and from enslaving their wanted children. And all of this made him among the wealthiest people in the entire American colonies. His attitude is the same as that is reflected in this 1768 advertisement. To be let by William Kelly, a very valuable tract of about 2,000 acres of land in the county of Morris in East Jersey, the title clear and indisputable and will be warranted to the purchaser. There is on it now the largest and finest breed of cattle in America imported from Holland, and as good horses as any in the province, all or any of which with about 20 slaves, bred to farming and country work, among which was a good blacksmith, a mason, and a shoemaker, will be sold, and possession of the whole immediately after given to the tenant or purchaser. But also in Morris County, just a few years later, down the street from us in East Hanover, Pastor Jacob Green would lead the First Presbyterian Church towards a different truth. Green was the first person in New Jersey to come out in support of the Revolution in 1776. By the spring of 1778, though, after the awful winter at Valley Forge and other setbacks, prospects seemed hopeless. So the Continental Congress declared April 22nd, 1778, a day of fasting and prayer. This was a common practice reflecting the belief that adversity was punishment from God, and that atonement through fasting and prayer might help. Green was one of the pro-revolutionary clergy who preached a fast day sermon, but his was different. He did ask God's blessing on the glorious enterprise. But he also warned that God might withhold victory in punishment for the failure to end slavery, which he called one of the great and crying evils among us. It was not just God whose judgment he feared. He asked, what foreign nation can believe that we, who so loudly complain of Britain's attempts to oppress and enslave us, are at the same time voluntarily holding multitudes of fellow creatures in abject slavery while declaring that we esteem liberty the greatest of all earthly blessings. With acute foresight, Green predicted that we shall have inward convulsions, contentions, oppressions, and even calamities, so that our liberty will be uncomfortable till we wash our hands from the guilt of Negro slavery. His appeal, of course, did not cause the colonists to abolish slavery, But he did persuade his parishioners in the fall of 1781 to adopt articles of agreement that no member of their church could own another human being. His guidance to his flock was, as we suppose all human creatures have a natural right to freedom, we cannot but look on their being held in slavery as an unnatural evil and one of the greatest injuries to mankind. And therefore, we will not use this slavery ourselves and will prudently endeavor to prevent it in others. As you can hear, Greene's arguments for abolition were rooted in an instinctual grasp of human equality. And his arguments were published and well known. Those opposed advanced counter-arguments of shocking incoherence, maintaining in place harsh and separate justice for blacks for fear of slave revolts. They also argued that since slaves were raised in servitude, they were ignorant of what freedom was, and so were actually happy, happier even than their masters. Yet, as they argued that slaves were contented, they also insisted that slave owners were the most ardent partisans of liberty because they could see firsthand how bad enslavement was. And then they spoke wildly of gory attacks that these supposedly happy slaves would visit on whites if ever they were freed. In the end, like Lewis Morris and Thomas Jefferson, New Jersey revolutionaries swallowed hypocrisy in chunks as they chowed down on the wealth brought by enslavement on stolen land that they could get no other way. And however uncomfortable whites' liberty may have been, black people, enslaved and free, lived their days edged by actual violence and simmering brutality. New Jersey's discomfort with slavery and with the presence of blacks persisted. In 1788, they banned the importation of slaves from elsewhere, but at the same time made it illegal for free blacks to move here from other states. This continuing tension led to the passage of New Jersey's gradual abolition law of 1804. But then, in 1807, New Jersey took away the rights of free black men to vote, which they previously had held. The Gradual Abolition Act of 1804 did not free a single person. It did provide that any child of an enslaved woman born after the law passed would become free in 21 years if you were female, in 25 years if you were man. But if they wanted to, the owners of these children could give them up as paupers to the state and then take them back as indentured servants for whom they would receive a stipend to cover the costs of raising them. Now, even before this, you could free your enslaved person, and a few people did, but that required posting a bond in case the freed person could not gain a living and became a ward of the state. So there were financial penalties for freeing a slave. On the other hand, even after 1804, slaves who had not yet reached the age of freedom could readily be sold into a southern state where they would remain enslaved for life, regardless of what New Jersey's law said. Indeed, after 1804, it was not lost on New Jersey slaveholders that their human property was becoming less valuable in New Jersey than they would be if sold to enslavers just over the border. So there was a brisk, though largely illegal, trade in kidnapped humans, all black, slave and free, by kidnappers. Indeed, beginning in 1818, a ring of slave traders run by Judge Van Wyck of nearby Middlesex County kidnapped and sold 137 people down south. The Lost Souls Project is trying to create a memorial to these people and to recover as much about their lives as possible. In 1846, due to continuing pressure to end slavery, New Jersey law was changed to recast slaves born before 1804 as indentured servants for life. This was really not much better than being enslaved, except that they gained some limited rights to sue for mistreatment. But they could still be sold to the South. The last enslaved people in New Jersey were not freed until New Jersey ratified the 13th Amendment on the second try in 1866. Now, there are some bright spots in Morris County's history of enslavement. Besides Jacob Green's light, the Underground Railroad ran right through Morris County from Boonton to its endpoint in Jersey City. Bethel African American Methodist Episcopal Church, which is also down the street, is proud to claim as a founder Bishop Nazary, who was born enslaved in Virginia in 1803, but became a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Bishop Nazary Way in Morristown is named after him, and there's a plaque there that has been put up talking about his accomplishments. The Underground Railroad was so compelling and dangerous an enterprise because federal fugitive slave laws founded in the Constitution were passed in 1793 and in 1850, requiring the return of runaway slaves from other states and prescribing rewards for doing so. Charles Hopkins was a white Boonton resident who was a very active conductor on the railroad. His father, Nathan, owned the Powerville Hotel along the Morris Canal, and that was an important station on the railroad. Charles tells a harrowing tale of when he was 14, transporting a passenger, a fugitive slave, from the woods near his home in the deep of the night, being pursued by a particularly nasty constable from Morris County, who he described as a fit companion of Simon Legree, but with none of Legree's cunning. On the night in question, Charles' father had distracted the pursuing constable to chase him in one direction, while young Charles drove a special two-wheeled cart like a bat out of hell to successfully escape with his passenger hidden under the driver's seat. Now, even though we love to hear these tales of escape, it is important to understand that since the fugitive slave law was federal, even enslaved people who made it to the North could be kidnapped by slave catchers from the South at any moment until their dying day. And once back in the South, they would be punished and re-enslaved. So even in freedom, there was no guarantee, unless the person went to Canada. And indeed, that is what Morris County's own Bishop Nazary did. After heroic service on the Underground Railroad, he moved to Ontario and helped found an AME congregation for a community of freed blacks who had settled there. Even now, with chattel slavery long gone, we continue to experience convulsions, contentions, oppressions, and even calamities, in Jacob Green's words, due to the legacy of slavery. Jacob Green and the Underground Railroad conductors made up a small portion of white people in New Jersey. Most were complacent or even ardent supporters of slavery until the Civil War ended it. May this legacy of indifference end with us. Let love and humility guide us as we do this work.
$17.83 for sale. Healthy, strong, young Negro man, 20 years old, talks Dutch and English, has had the smallpox and measles, can be well recommended. He is accustomed to all kinds of housework, as well as farming, sold for no fault. 1821, estate inventory in Pequannock, fowls, carpet, black girl, $6.87.
we've heard about the harm caused to people of African descent over 4+ centuries in the United States and the colonies that preceded the founding of the country, and in New Jersey, and the colony and the state. Now let's take a look at what has been proposed to repair the harm to some degree. Calls and actions for reparations have been around since at least 1873, when the freedwoman Belinda Royal sued her former enslaver for a pension. Writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates have made the case that reparations are not just about slavery, they're about the political, legal systems that have prevented African Americans of African descent from exercising their rights and from accumulating wealth up to and including the present day. Some of the structural impediments have been Jim Crow in the South, job discrimination and housing discrimination across the country, and the selective application of the GI Bill following World War II, redlining and credit denial in housing, and the present phase of mass incarceration. This is to say that the harms of chattel slavery continue today. These and other factors have led to the effective resegregation of schools throughout the country. Look around New Jersey and you will see primary and secondary education systems that are almost entirely segregated. Ibram X. Kendi writes that about the myth of progress standing in the way of progress. There have been steps toward racial justice in America. These have been accompanied by steps that further racial injustice. Our policies highlight the former and downplay the latter. It is necessary for us to take action to mitigate the harm that our institutions have caused and to continue to cause. Here in New Jersey, the majority of the voting population is uncomfortable with reparations. So it's been a topic that politicians have been reluctant to broach. In 2019, Senator Ron Rice of Essex and Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter of Passaic introduced legislation to establish the New Jersey Reparations Task Force to conduct research and develop reparatory proposals and recommendations to address the generational harms caused by New Jersey's role in the American institution of slavery and its legacy of systemic racism. Governor Murphy countered by establishing a wealth disparity task force to study the causes of and remedies for the longstanding wealth disparities that affect Black and Hispanic Americans, which is all to the good, but does not address and acknowledge the special harm that people of African descent have experienced for over these 400+ years. The New Jersey Institute for Social Justice has initiated a campaign to make people in New Jersey aware of the call for a reparations task force and to mobilize support for the study. The campaign has the slogan, "Say the word, reparations." Ryan Haygood, the president and CEO of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, said that the Say the Word campaign name was born out of a conversation with Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin around June of 2021. When Haygood explained how slavery had created systemic inequities for Black New Jerseyans, he said Coughlin pushed back on the word reparations. We laid all of this at Speaker Coughlin's feet, and he said, reparations, the word unsettles people. It makes people uncomfortable. Haygood recounted, we said, imagine how uncomfortable it is to be on the other side of the racial inequality. Haygood continued, Coughlin said, I don't deny it exists, but why don't we call it a racial equity task force or a wealth gap task force, which is what the governor ultimately settled on. Why don't we just call it something else? It should be noted that the United States has paid reparations to individuals in the past, most notably Japanese Americans interned in camps during World War II. Just to be clear, I have not come that far on this journey, and I have a long way to go. Through my middle years, I was complacent about the harm that our society and we do to the Black lives among us. I sought the best for my family, not realizing how much of that depended on privilege. It is only in the past 5 years that I've come to realize that privilege for me and mine is at the continued expense of those of African descent. For me, the time of reckoning has come. It's time to do everything I can to reorder society away from white supremacy, in whatever form it takes, and to move toward repair. Such repair includes reparations. We need to act, but we also need to study, and we also need study and reflection, with the voices of those harmed included. Getting out of our comfort zone is required. What can we do now? UU Faith Action New Jersey has aligned with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice and the Say the Word Reparations campaign. With it and other local groups in supporting the New Jersey Reparations Task Force initiative in the legislature. You can reach out to New Jersey Faith Action New Jersey through me, Toby Tyler, our congressional liaison, or directly through the Faith Action website. You can go to the New Jersey Institute website and see the materials on Say the Word. Not surprisingly, the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus is in support of the bill establishing the Reparations Task Force. But clearly, we need wide-ranging support, and that means support from the majority white communities like ours. Your voice is critical to this effort, and we call on all of us to stand with us in this righteous work. Let me just note once again that there are also resources on reparations listed on the resources handout that you can pick up on your way out this morning at the ushers table, I believe, as you make your way to coffee hour. And now, if you'll please join me in song number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing, from the Gray Songbook, or up on the screen. The song is often referred to as the Black National Anthem.
Rejoicing
Our closing words are from The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. And it's about love. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within. I use the word love here, not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. May it be so.